worked at the museum best part of 16 years now. Most of that's seasonal work in the summer, but I do work in the winter sometimes as well. I used to drive the trams. I've demonstrated in the town, the various venues in the town, but I've been here predominantly for the last 8 years. The winding engine house, the heapstead, and to an extent the drift mine as well. Now, this is the entranceway to Mahogany Drift Mine. Nobody knows for certain why it was called Mahogany Drift. Various theories abound which I won't go into. It opened initially in 1855, and to cut a long story short, it finally closed for good in 1958. So just over 100 years of use. And then it was reopened in 1979 for the museum. Now, if you were to go back centuries ago, before they mined all the coal, and there was still plenty of coal underground, frequently in those times, a coal seam stretching for miles in all directions would come to the surface in places, commonly sticking out the side of a hill. Where they first seen the coal, that's where they first broke into it. As the coal seam receded further down into the hillside, to get more, they just drifted in after it with a series of tunnels, which of course is why it's called a drift mine. Here in West County Durham, the coal mine started first, years in advance of the East Durham collieries, simply because the coal wasn't so far down at this side. There was more drift mines in West Durham, and the deep shaft mines weren't as deep. Would you like us to describe a bit what goes on here? Because this diagram illustrates by far the main method by which a coal seam would be mined during the 1800s and early 1900s. But this method continued being used by many collieries right through when all the mines closed, even because this method has certain advantages. In fact, sometimes they've got to use this method. Those crisscross tunnels through that part of the seam are simply where they've already mined the coal out in previous times, and as they went, they fit timber supports into those excavations to keep the roadways open. These miners are called hewers. The hewers break the coal down from the coal face and shovel it into tubs. Other miners called putters push filled tubs back over leg gauge track around circuitous routes, up and down inclines, back to a more major part of the mine where there was a siding to push the filled tubs into, and the neighbouring siding with empty tubs so they could take everyone back to the hewer. Ideally, of course, putters were young, fit, well-muscled young lads. Young lads broke down when they got to the age of 16. By then they're getting bigger and stronger. That's when some of them became putters that had their physique spotted. Sometimes instead of a strong putter you would see two weaker fellas, one pushing the other pulling. They were known as half putters. Putters were paid by the tubs of coal they pushed, so two half putters had to share their wages. Other fellas handled pit ponies. This fella goes to one of them locations with his pony. He leaves empty tubs. He hitches filled tubs to the pony and pulls them back out towards the mine entrance. In some mines that would mean all the way back, while in other mines it would mean so far back to an engine plane where the train them were linked together and pulled the rest of the way by a steam-driven winch like the one on the top of our incline. A lot of different mines all have slightly different ways of working, so I'm giving you typical scenarios here. Now, after working in an area of coal in that manner, when they decided to retreat out of that area for the last time, on the way out, they would take an extra slice of coal, see, off the sides of the pillars to get more coal when they're still down there, you see. At the same time, pulling the supports away so they could reuse that timber again. Allowing the roof to cave into the roadways behind them. But to avoid any further major subsidence, for example, if that coal seam wasn't very far down, there was buildings up there, well, in those cases that leaves so much coal behind in the form of those large rectangular pillars. And in that case, of course, we're actually leaving more coal down than what we're getting up. In my hometown, Consett, for example, they often used to say that Consett was largely built on fresh air. But I suppose that would go for a lot of places around here, wouldn't it? In other cases, subsidence wasn't a problem. For example, if that coal seam wasn't very far, if that coal seam was far enough down not to affect things above, which of course often happened in some of the deeper shaft mines, or if they owned the land and there wasn't buildings on it and they weren't bothered if it subsided, Well, in those cases, I'm retreating back out of that area. They would actually take more and more coal away from each pillar in turn, allow those to cave in completely behind them, and in that way they were able to extricate nearly all the coal. I might just add that was a very dangerous operation, had to be done in a very pre-planned manner. Mahogany drift at one time, it tunneled into this hillside by 1.5 miles, with workings like on the diagram, 1 mile to the right and 1 mile to the left all the way. Now we just go down this main route 60 yards to show people what it was like, and because it's a main route into a mine, they made it reasonably high for people to walk for the most part. They didn't have to do that, and some colleges they would just make it 4 foot 6.5 inches high. You see, that was just enough to allow a pit pony which hadn't to be any taller than 4 foot 6 inches. It does dip a little bit in places though. The lowest it goes to, and it's only in a couple of places, is 4 foot 8. Most of my working life was as a design draftsman, design engineer, working for a variety of different companies. I was never a chief engineer or anything like that. I was just an ordinary Joe Bloggs design engineer, design draftsman, on general stuff. I found it hard to get work in that lane, to keep working that lane, because as we lost the industry and all the engineering companies that went with them, industries like mining and shipbuilding and iron and steel making, them things receded. I started out my life at Considine and Steelworks, 10 mile west of here, who owned their own mines at one time. That's one of the reasons I started up there. They were sitting on millions of tons of top quality coke coal, which of course you need to make coke for iron making. I learned a lot of my mining off an old timer who worked in one of their mines. He worked with his old methods of mining, and he taught us an awful lot. I always speak very highly of Considine Company. He always spoke very badly of them, by the way. But as I say, after that I worked as a design engineer, design draftsman, and I looked for something else to do, and I was fortunate enough to get a place in the museum here, and I've enjoyed working here. I like history. I like particularly the history of regional history in recent times, because if you had a time traveling machine and you had the option of going somewhere, going in the past, what would you do with it first? I think most people would say the first thing they'd do, they'd go back to where their area was, just back to their childhood, to their parents, recent times. That's where they would first stop, wouldn't they? And then they would take it from there, and that's where I'm the same. This is important now. You're asking about what might get the kids interested. That's a tall order. But the one thing that you should do, this is something you know yourself. You think back of the years you went to school, college, university, and I'm the same. Maybe it's because I'm not that intelligent. But the times you were at university or college, if you got a lecturer and they were gabbling on, going at a pace that was a bit beyond what you could keep up with, not explaining things very well, then you get lost off, you lose interest, and it becomes blooming murder, doesn't it, go to them lessons. But you think there are times where you've had a really good lecturer, and they just talk clearly, simple things, they describe things simply, they pause at the right times, they allow a few seconds for your brain to tick over and to take it on board, and you're getting to understand things, subjects, it may be maths, engineering, science, it may be anything that you've formerly found difficult to understand, but now you find you understand things you found difficult before. That makes you interested. You get a bit of pride in it, don't you? That's the first thing. That's the most, just try to explain things well. That's what I've tried to do in the museum. I try to avoid overcomplicated explanations. I try to avoid certain mining terminology that nobody will understand, and I convey it as simply as I can, and I've found that works a treat.
Fantastic. And if a child, a youth, would want to be involved in the museum, saying what you do, how would they go about that?
They can come and they can get work experience here. The schools do it. and that they might think they like it. So when they're leaving school, they might think about trying to apply for a job here.
Yeah.
They can come and do voluntary work. There's an organisation in the museum which allows people of any age to apply to do voluntary work, demonstrating if they've got certain skills, you know,
Yeah.
that they can apply to the museum, and that always increases the chances of getting a job here as well.
Mm-hmm.
And in my case, I was lucky enough. I applied for a job, and I didn't get it first of all, but I was put on a waiting list.
Yeah.
And it turned out that a fella who had worked here for quite a lot of years retired because he had health problems,
Yeah.
and somebody else's detriment was my, you know, my chance to get at the museum.
Yeah, of course.
And I got the phone call just a few days as about the due to be open for the summer season, and I took it, and I've never looked back.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much.
Thank
That
you.
is